I'm AP Townley, and this is Roleplay Culture. This is part 2 of integrating, or perhaps not integrating, mechanics from Baldur's Gate 3 into the tabletop of Dungeons & Dragons. If you want to watch the first part, check it out right up over here. Now on with the show. So even though the video game Baldur's Gate 3 is based on the ttrpg of D&D, and is even set in one of the D&D campaign worlds, there are some noticeable differences. So many, in fact, that we couldn't even fit any of the real noticeable ones into one video. So here are a few more examples of differences between Baldur's Gate 3 and D&D, and perhaps whether or not we should port those changes into that tabletop game. Potions. Types of potions and what they can do are mostly the same in both systems. If there are any real differences, I would say the frequency of obtaining them was higher, but that's just my opinion. But there was one simple but very noticeable difference. Taking a potion of any kind requires your bonus action instead of your action. This game, as well as D&D, is a turn-based game, meaning your character can only do so much, take so many actions per turn before the bad guys do the same. So action economy is very important. You can do a lot more with your action than you can with your bonus action. Taking something that normally takes an action to do, like quaffing a healing potion, and turning it into a bonus action is a big swing in the action economy of the game. And that is why I don't think this is something we should use in our games of D&D. It's just too strong. D&D is already a very survivable game, meaning it's pretty hard to kill the characters. And this would just make that discrepancy even worse. Using your action to take a potion so you can survive another round, or use it to make an attack that might end the threat, makes a more interesting and tense situation than just letting them do both. I will say that this bonus action potion taking has been a homebrew rule for quite a while, though I can't see how common it is. I am curious if taking potions with your bonus action might inadvertently nerf some of the other weaponized bonus action abilities like Polar Master. Let me know what you think in the comments below. Now, this change doesn't really affect Baldur's Gate 3 too much, mostly because encounters are so much more frequent, as are the potions themselves. A lot of the potions that last usually have a caveat that only one can be going at a time, so that helps. As a side note, there is a new potion in Baldur's Gate 3 that doesn't appear in D&D. The Elixir of Arcane Cultivation, and its greater versions. That's a mouthful. This potion just gives a character an extra spell slot to use based on which type it is. And that's pretty cool. I call these types of potions mana potions, and I've created my own versions, as have many others. But strangely, there's nothing like this in D&D. Maybe because they know spellcasters are already so strong. Speaking of which, the Haste spell / speed potion. Haste is a 3rd level spell available mostly to wizards and sorcerers. It gives a bonus to AC, dex saves, and movement. It also gives you an extra action, though that action is severely limited. You can only make one attack with it, even if you have the extra attack feature. You can't cast spells with it, or do a whole bunch of other things. But in Baldur's Gate 3, it's mostly the same, but that extra action? No restrictions. None. Nada. Yeah. So if you have a 5th level fighter with extra attack, you can make up to 4 attacks in one round. Your wizard can cast 2 fireballs. This is broken as hell. The speed potion's even worse. This potion is basically haste in a bottle that anyone can use. And remember from earlier, potions only take a bonus action to use. And with the alchemy system letting you create potions, you're always going to have a few ready, if you're diligent. Yeah, this is way too powerful for the tabletop, especially for spellcasters. They're already so powerful. Like I said, messing with the action economy can have very swingy results. It's fine in the game. Again, encounters are very common, but let's leave this to the digital world. Multiclassing. Multiclassing, or taking levels in multiple classes for your character, exists in both D&D and Baldur's Gate 3, but they work a little differently. With multiclassing in D&D, there are ability score requirements that need to be fulfilled, and some are stricter than others. You must fulfill the requirements for both the class that you are starting out as well as the class that you're multiclassing into. For instance, if you took a few levels in Rogue and then wanted to multiclass into Fighter, this is how you do it. As a Rogue, you would have to have at least a 13 in Dexterity, which is what you would probably have anyway. Rogue's a very Dex-heavy class. Fighters require a 13 in Strength or Dexterity, your choice. Well, we already have a 13 in Dex, so very easy. But let's say we wanted to be a monk who multiclassed into Paladin. As a monk, we would need a 13 in Dexterity and in Wisdom, which is fine, because those stats are important to monks. But here comes the wrinkle. Paladins require a 13 in Strength and a 13 in Charisma. These two classes might seem like they conceptually go together, but by the rules, not so much. It's probably the hardest pairing. But in Baldur's Gate 3, these limitations do not exist, which opens up some very interesting possibilities. But that's a show for another time. And I don't think this is as good an idea for the tabletop. There are some combinations that are just OP. Some classes in D&D are very front-loaded, and it can become a real problem, if it isn't already. It might be a problem in the video game, too. More testing is needed. Not only can you multiclass freely, but once you get a certain NPC following you around, you can, for a nominal fee, respec your character almost completely. You could take your 8th level sorcerer and for 100 gold, turn them into a 5th level sorcerer, 3rd level warlock, a swordlock. Tell me in the comments below if you think multiclassing in Baldur's Gate 3 is overpowered. Familiars. Familiars are a lot of fun in D&D. Nothing makes a wizard feel more wizardly than summoning your own personal familiar. Or warlock with a Pact of the Chain. Let's not forget them. For mere 10 gold, you can cast the Find Familiar spell as a ritual without spending any spell slots as often as you want. Well, as long as you have the dosh. The creative use of said familiar is most of the fun. Are you scouting the way ahead with your raven? Or spying on a meeting with your spider? But a lot of that creativity comes from one simple fact. Familiars, for the most part, can't attack. They can take many other actions, such as the helps action, to give advantage on attacks, but by and large, they themselves can't attack. Warlocks with the Pact of the Chain can sacrifice one of their attacks to enable their familiar to use their reaction to attack. It's a pretty stiff requirement. But in Baldur's Gate 3, things are different. You can only summon a familiar or companion freely once per short rest. The help action is changed. It no longer gives advantage on attack rolls. We'll discuss that a bit more in a minute. But speaking of attacking, familiars can attack. In fact, the Pact of the Chain 5th level feature lets the familiar attack twice. Not only can they attack, but some of them have special attacks. The Raven can blind people, for example. And it doesn't require your bonus action or anything. They're just another body on the initiative wheel. I keep referencing both familiars and companions. Familiars are what you get from the Find Familiar spell. But you can get something of the like from other sources, and I'm not talking about subclass features, like with the Ranger Beastmaster. In Baldur's Gate 3, you can pick up a loyal hound that follows you around and has its own special abilities. Now, I don't really consider this all that different from D&D. You can purchase a dog or a horse. You can even game a special familiar such as an imp or a pseudo-dragon by making a contract with it, with the DM's permission, of course. There's more information in the Monster Manual sections about when that is permissible and the benefits you can get from it, such as magic resistance. But I guess the real question here is whether or not we should adopt any of these rule changes. Far be it from me to suggest giving casters even more power, but I don't think it's that big of a deal to allow familiars to attack. For one, they don't do a lot of damage. not nearly enough to make any kind of swings of power, especially if we require the character to use their bonus action to issue that command, which is in line with other similar summoning spells. And remember, there are other ways for characters to get familiars and companions than just from spellcasting. Some creatures have abilities that are just useless unless they can make attacks. And it makes sense, doesn't it? It's very incongruous if an animal that would normally be able to fight in the wild not be able to fight just because you summoned them. But one thing is for certain. Scratch is a very good boy. The help action. As mentioned earlier, the help action is one of the most useful actions a familiar can take in D&D, as well as anyone else for that matter. It gives the helped creature advantage on ability checks or attack rolls. Very useful. But in Baldur's Gate 3, quite different. The help action removes certain conditions from an ally. Burning, downed, that's being reduced to 0 hit points, ensnared, entangled, enwebbed, prone, and sleeping. All conditions you want to avoid or end quickly. And the help action solves those problems. Curiously though, this action is not available to the standard familiar from the Find Familiar spell. Probably because familiars have their own special actions and can fight. Having said that, certain companions that function like familiars, such as the dog Scratch, can take the help action. That makes them invaluable in combat. Not only can they fight and find secret stashes, but that they can keep you from dying or wake you up from a sleep spell. So, is this worth porting over to the tabletop? Well, most effects that the new help action would end usually have an ability check to get out of or take an action to end, which is basically what the old help action would buff. So the Baldur's Gate 3 help action is a little stronger, I think, but I don't think there is much difference between the two, so take it or leave it. I don't think it would mess too many things up. So there are some differences in D&D and Baldur's Gate 3, and whether we should or shouldn't adopt them into D&D proper. Be sure to subscribe, ring that bell, smash that like button, leave comments below, share the video, and I'll see you in the parlor.